Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy with another weekly Wednesday live stream. This is, oh my gosh, we've almost run out of January. It's January 28th, 2026, and it is noon Eastern Time Wednesday. So you know what that means. It's another opportunity for us to drill down into woke Wall Street and explore the things that are not woke. If you are, let me switch over to comments view. If you are on Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook, and separately streaming on Substack and have questions, feel free to either add to the comments. I will do my best to try and answer those questions and provide feedback. Or if you're watching this after the recording and have questions, email Jonathan, Jonathan. You see that at the bottom of your screen, Jonathan, Jonathan at unwokeinvesting.com. Today, I am just floored by the parade of nonsense in the world of finance. I'm going to touch on something that I've spoken on before, but it's the beginning of another year. We're in January, we're concluding January 2026, and the nonsense parade starts up once again. The year ahead projections and the year in review, the summary of 2025 in the world of finance, I am reminded very much of what happened during COVID and what we found out about the way that doctors and hospitals work. Unfortunately for us, there are a lot of people with things like immunization jabs and COVID shots and those sorts of things in the medical arena who clearly didn't do enough challenging and questioning of the efficacy and what was in the shots. In the world of finance, it's eerily similar. We have a lot of people who sort of follow the bouncing ball and don't ask the right questions about what's being done to their investor clients. So you think about financial planners, financial advisors, stockbrokers, insurance agents who sell insurance-based products and those sorts of things. And there is a steady drumbeat of narrative that comes out of woke Wall Street that constantly pushes an agenda. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it has everything to do, we're going to try to keep this surface level and as accessible as possible. It has everything to do with crafting and shaping the public opinion of what the markets means. Overwhelmingly, when you hear media coverage or the social media or pundits on talking head platforms talking about the markets, again, air quoting that, most often, they're talking about the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is not by any stretch of the imagination the markets, but it's what their eye is drawn to. It's what everybody is led to think is representative or indicative of where they should be investing and whether or not the markets are up or down. The whole thing is designed to be misleading. And the shortage of people working in the world of finance who challenge that, who ask the question, why are we only looking at that small number of investment opportunities, especially when people like me and many others, including some significant economists, are challenging so many people having been overfunded, overinvested in that small number of companies. And to put a little finer point on that, we have a very small number, around 30-ish companies, who comprise the lion's share of the S&P 500. So you have, at one point a year or so ago, we were talking about around 7 companies comprising 40% of that small little index, which means that even if you carve out only around 500 companies of the roughly 42,000 that might receive investment attention and only focus on those 500, even in that little niche, even within that little microcosm, only about 7 companies were getting the lion's share of that funding. So that is an overinvested marketplace that completely ignores, or almost thoroughly ignores, the broad spans of the rest of the investing universe. If you follow me on Substack, by the way, you'll see a post that I did that draws the analogy to real estate, and you'll see the little blue square. I created a reference point that hopefully is accessible to people, but the way we talk about the markets now is very much like the world of real estate all of a sudden deciding that the only property worth considering and talking about and buying and selling in is a 5 square mile radius in central United States, and that's it. That it's sort of the equivalent of what we're talking about when we talk about the markets. And so here's what that looks like from behind the curtains. I'll tell you what is presented to me as a financial professional. I own a financial firm that works in all sorts of different due diligence processes and investment management and those kinds of things. And I'm looking at an email now. I'm presented with these on an annual basis, usually early December uh, to late January. There are all these talks, there are all these sort of pushed out to the public commentary that have to do with the S&P 500. And here's one, just looking at this email now, we've got a segment of it that is called Mark to Markets. We've got something called the Morning Compass. And then there is a whole series that are designed for me as a financial professional to sort of point and shoot, share out with the world. It's called client facing in my world. It's client facing, meaning it's for more than just my consumption and edification. These are the sorts of things that financial firms, in the rush and busyness of life and not wanting to generate and create their own investment due diligence and guidance and do their own research, they can sign up for these sorts of things. And many of them are automatic newsletters that just generate, and they'll put a picture of me and a banner and my company logo, and it goes out to however many subscribers that I have. And it constantly has this steady drumbeat narrative of keeping everybody's focus on effectively not much more than the S&P 500. That's unhealthy. It's a broken, unhealthy environment that steers everybody into considering only a tiny, tiny little microcosm, a little fraction of the investing universe. And then, lo and behold, when those continue to be overfunded, we ignore that, which is broken. That's not due diligence. That is not prudence. It's not any sort of definable investment standard. It's simply herd mentality. And then, of course, when lo and behold, the inevitable happens, and there's a market drawback, and those drop in value, then all of a sudden, the markets are said to have done a pullback. These expressions and this sort of mental mind games, the mental pretzels you have to draw yourself into to believe that sort of narrative is ridiculous. The article, again, hopefully does a good job of illustrating step by step what's happened, where we've gotten to, and the best way out of it. But these things, and there's another one, there's a 2026 market outlook and positioning for portfolios. That, of course, is going to be a whole series of posts and information from all sorts of different financial services firms, all effectively talking about the same thing, as if this broken marketplace, this overemphasis of the S&P 500 didn't happen. I'm not willing to turn a blind eye and think that the treatment of ignoring over 99% of the available investment marketplace in favor of potentially trying to continue to overfund those 30-ish, I call them the globalist bubble. It's unprofessional, and it is worthy of note. So the more you see it, the more I can call to light and put daylight on this sort of, I think I want to call it malfeasance. It is malfeasant behavior. The more likely it is that word spreads and people actually start doing a better job of looking with a skeptical eye on what's being fed to us by these financial firms. So, um, sorry, there's a message popping up here. Oh, that's good to know. Uh, Again, if you are on one of those social media platforms, Rumble, X, YouTube, or Facebook, feel free to post a comment and I'll try my best to answer that. But at, at the end of the day, I want to draw, I tend to use analogies because I understand the world of finance can be difficult to understand, especially when you get all these sort of puff piece nonsensical articles that are constantly churning out, and many people feel overwhelmed by the volume of mail and email we get from financial services firms with all sorts of annual statements and projections and those kinds of things. That can be a daunting world, and I want to be the fog cutter. I want to get through all of that smoke and mirrors nonsense and and help people to understand what it is you're actually seeing. And propaganda comes to mind. The word propaganda pops into my mind. If you are being propagandized or being trained to think a certain way about markets that's advantageous to people other than you, that's harmful and damaging. And if we're in an environment right now, and I argue that we are experiencing a reopening of free markets. Capital markets are expanding, they're opening, and they're moving away from the years that we had of that consolidated viewpoint of trying to have very few companies capture significant amounts of capital markets, which means they were overfunded, which means that that's a bubble, if I'm right. And I've argued that for a couple of years now. That's that globalist bubble. If that's the environment, then you need to be armed with better information than what's being pumped out by institutions like this one. The kinds of places that will tell you, hey, just stay the course, stay in the S&P 500, it's an index, and look, it went down and it went up and it did this and it did that, and there are, of course, there are going to be pullbacks, but those are natural and normal. Stay the course and stick with it, and the S&P 500 is good because this, and it has this long history. Don't buy it, because that S&P 500 talk is training your brain artificially to ignore over 99% of the investment opportunity that lies out there. And anybody indexing and going into those very limited number of companies right now, I suggest should rethink their investment strategy, work with a professional, or take the research that we're doing at UnWoke.Academy and the Financial PMA and look carefully at what I suggest are better, more suitable alternatives than letting your money default into virtually identical investments that virtually everybody else owns, overfunding and exposing your money to that globalist bubble. It's just wrong and bad and unhealthy all the way around. If you see some of those newsletters, or if you get one from financial professionals that you know and think that they fit that category, that it's just, and actually the chances are slim that you're getting a newsletter that counters that narrative, that challenges in any way or asks questions. But if you get the newsletter that says, hey, look, the S&P 500 this and the S&P 500 that, and stay the course and all that stuff, send a screenshot, share it with me. Let's drill down and find the truth of the matter and expose how redundant and mimicking that marketplace is. If we have top-down top-down messaging that tells from on high on Wall Street, "Hey, everybody, look over here," And all it is a tiny little mix of globalist companies that have already proven themselves to be so overfunded, it's kind of ridiculous. That needs to be called out. And that's a hint for anybody that that works in the world of finance. I think that there's ample opportunity out there to create a real newsletter and share it with the world that gets the real news out. And looked at another way, there's a video that I saw some time ago. It's kind of made its rounds on social media that shows a series of local newscasts that all say the same thing. It's the same script read by local newscasters all over the country. So it tells us that some news agency or the Associated Press or whoever it is, ABC or NBC, sends out a script and everybody reads it. And what that means is that is enforcing collectivism. It's enforcing this training of all minds to think alike and make the same moves and take the same actions. That's wildly unhealthy. And in this environment, in the world of finance, I believe that something very similar is happening. When you get all these financial firms that send out nearly identical messaging, something's broken. And when they're turning a blind eye to what I believe clearly to be a bubble of overfunded small number of companies, and when they're turning a blind eye to the vast array of other investment options that are out there, other companies that could receive funding, that could, in the future, mark the competitors for those 30-ish companies that are overfunded. And we have a broken system. And it becomes more broken and it stays stagnant and broken the longer we have a market full of financial professionals unwilling to ask the hard questions. Why are they all looking and sounding nearly identical in their guidance? Why are they all saying the same thing? This has been another weekly Wednesday live stream from UnWoke.Academy with Jonathan Broadbent, your host. Hope you have a great week. Take care.